agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for the public viewing at the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember that your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. Council is streaming live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to photograph and record the meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you wish to be filmed, do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourselves so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be aware. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, should members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Welcome to all those in attendance, and now I call on Mr. Bishop to introduce all the officers.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Kevin Bishop. I'm the Lead Development Manager for Planning Services. To my right, we have the Legal Advisor to the committee today, Dawn Evans. To my left, we have the Presenting Officer for the first item number 6, Land at Woodside Stables, the Great Hall Road, St Mawson Road, Walsham, Gemma Webster. And Gemma will also present item number 7, Land adjacent to Steepways, Walsham. To my right, we have Charlotte Atkins, who will present item number 8, Horston Farm, Brom's Ash, Ross and Y. Also joining us on virtually is Mark Lewis, the Highways Officer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll start now with apologies for absence. We have apologies, I believe, from Councillors Paul Andrews and Graham Jones. The name substitutes are Councillor Summers for Councillor Andrews and Councillor Mike Jones for Councillor Graham Jones. We've got our Joneses in the right order. Right. Declarations of interest. Are there, Councillor Wilding?
Yeah, I have a general declaration of interest for item 3.
Item 3. Good. The minutes of the last.
Sorry,
Chairman. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yes, I know one of the objectors on item 6 and 7.
Right. Are there any other declarations?
Item 8, I've got non-pecuniary interest that I know the applicant.
Right. Are there are no further other oh, Councillor Wilding.
Sorry, Chair, I think I meant item 8.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I thought that was the case. Right. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 28th of April. Are they approved as an accurate record of that meeting? April, sorry. What did I say? Sorry, 28th of April. Is that agreed? Did someone propose the approval of those? Right, are those?
Chairman, I think you mean the 9th of June.
Yeah, and it's down here, it's the 28th of April.
Well, according to the 9th of June.
9th of June, right. 9th of June, sorry. Right, the 9th of June, approval. As proposed, seconded. Those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Right, we'll go on to item 5, which is the Chairman's announcement. I have nothing to announce other than to ask our Chief Planning Officer to outline some of the details relating to our, well, he'll outline them now, change of policy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to advise members that the NPPF has received a revision in July of this year. They are minor revisions to the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework. They relate to various aspects, and the changes are a result of the design, the Commission Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission and their report. In the new NPPF, it's the government has stated it's seeking to improve design quality, including the requirement for councils to produce local design codes and guides, etc. The word beautiful is now in the common vocabulary, but the government has they've stated this should be read as a high-level statement of ambition rather than a policy test. As you are aware, I'm sure that this council were awarded a pilot for producing work on design, and the council's policy team are actively pursuing that at the present time. So we are in the vanguard of that for producing design codes, etc. So that's moving forward at a pace, and hopefully we'll be reporting that in the future. But the reports today and the updates reflect the new NPPF. Thank you, Chairman. Can I also just update members on a procedural change which has happened recently due to the significant influx of planning applications into the department. Officers were being inundated with applications. So to bring them back down to a caseload level which is acceptable until we can bring more staff in, we've placed new applications in a holding pile, and they will be drip fed into officers when officers have capacity to achieve it. That is already seeing a significant improvement with applications being delivered out through the end of the process, with officers having the time to concentrate on their caseload rather than having inundated with new applications. So whilst we have a holding part, they are starting to move from that holding part. They're being taken in date order, so there's no one's jumping the queue, as it were. But when you see get notified of applications now, you will see officer awaited application awaiting officer allocation. That is the sole reason why. It's had a huge impact on officers. It's improved their workload, and it's more importantly as well, it's improved their health and well-being. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I do emphasise the scale of the increase in the number of planning applications that has hit the council, the planning department, aligned with the fact that there is a shortage of planning officers. Right. Well, we'll move on to the first item, which can I request the public speakers for agenda 6 join the meeting? Mrs. Clark, representing Welsh Newton and Llanafrel Group Parish Council, Mrs. Parkinson, a local resident, and Mr. Bowden, the applicant, all attending in person. Good morning. I will call on you once Ms. Webster has made her presentation to speak. Ms. Webster.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I refer you to the update sheet where one further representation was sent direct to members via email over the weekend regarding this application. The points raised are answered within the officer's report or will be covered by the presentation. The site is located within the settlement of Welsh Newton Common, shown by the red star on the map. Welsh Newton Common is identified within the core strategy, policy RA2, as a smaller settlement where proportional housing is broadly appropriate. The site is not located within an area of outstanding natural beauty, conservation area, and there are no listed buildings within the immediate vicinity. There are no other designations on site. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the construction of one detached 1.5-storey, 3-bedroom property with an attached double garage. Next slide, please. The application site comprises of stables and associated hard standings lying to the east of St Wilson's Road in the centre of Welsh Newton Common. The site is bounded by hedgerows and a field access gate onto the road. The area as a whole provides a sparsely populated character and appearance to the settlement within a regular pattern of development. The site is located within the settlement boundary defined within the Welsh Newton and Ganaroo Neighbour Development Plan, which was made September 2019. NDP policy WNL5 states that proposals for new market housing will be supported within the identified settlement boundary in Welsh Newton Common. Next slide, please. The proposed dwelling would replace the stables that currently exist on site. The dwelling will be set back from the road located towards the centre of the site, which is a fairly large plot allowing amenity space surrounding the site on all sides, maintaining the character of the surrounding dwellings. Existing trees along the western, northern and southern boundary will be retained. There will be no requirement to remove any trees nor hedgerow from the site. The access will be as existing and will provide visibility space of 25 metres in each direction. This application is on the same site as a refusal for application 190827, which was subsequently dismissed at appeal, as it was contrary to the NDP policy WLN4, as it was over 6 metres tall and had 4 bedrooms. This application seeks to amend and address the details and plans that were the reason for refusal in the previous application. The nearest residential neighbour to the site can be seen to the northeast of the proposal and is approximately 45 metres away, with an intervening track in between the two. Next slide, please. Policy WLN4 of the NDP states that care should be taken to ensure that buildings' height, scale and form do not disrupt the visual amenities of the immediate surroundings or impact adversely on a significant wider landscape view. Building materials are encouraged that retain the character of the settlement, and design should be informed by the distinctive local character of the rural area. Ridge height should not exceed 6 metres. This proposal will be 6 metres to the ridge, which has been reduced since the previous refusal to overcome the tension with the NDP policy. The design includes dormer windows on the first floor, and the materials will be a mix of natural stone and render under a slate roof. As part of the proposal, solar panels and an air source heat pump will be installed, along with the provision of an electric charging point. Concerns have been raised to state that the footprint has increased for the proposal. However, this proposal now includes an attached garage, which can be seen on the plans and has been taken into consideration with the footprint. A condition to remove permitted development rights has been included to maintain the smaller dwelling in accordance with the current NDP policy. Next slide, please. As stated earlier, the site is located within the settlement boundary. NDP policy WNL5 states that proposals for new market housing will be supported within identified settlement boundary of Welsh Newton Common. The policy further states that proposals should be small in scale for 1 or 2 properties, and development should adjoin clusters of existing buildings and not be isolated sites away from other housing. The proposals will be expected to demonstrate particular attention to the form, layout, character and setting of the site and its location within Welsh Newton. New housing should be accessed directly from a made-up road. House sizes should be limited to a maximum of 3 bedrooms to help address the local shortage of smaller affordable units for younger families. The proposal is to connect to a private treatment plant with associated groundwater safeway drainage field. Given the size of the site and the supporting information, the HRA has concluded that there are no pathways for any remaining nutrients, including phosphates, to enter the River Wye SAP from the foul surface water scheme proposed. Natural England have also confirmed no objections to the proposal. The land drainage officers have reviewed the proposal and visited the site and concluded no objections to the proposal in their comments, subject to conditions. The local authorities ecologist has no objections to the proposal, subject to conditions for recommendations of the ecology report to be followed and biodiversity enhancements to take place on the site. In addition, the tree officer has no objections to the proposal. With regards to highways, the area engineer acknowledges that whilst the nature of the road to Welsh Newton Common may require, in some instances, a reversing and using the passing places, the cumulative level of one dwelling is not found to amount to severe impact. There is sufficient visibility space, and whilst across the common land, which any works of access across requires the benefit of consent under the Commons Land Act, this is separate to the granting of planning permission. There is sufficient space on the site for parking and turning to ensure the vehicles enter and exit the site in a forward gear. Therefore, there is no highways objection. Next slide, please. Photographs show the internal area of the site with the existing stable block and parking area on the southern part of the site. The property that can be seen beyond the boundary in the top left photograph is that of the nearest adjacent property to the site. Next slide, please. These photographs are images from inside the site looking towards the existing stable block and access to the south, the western boundary and the eastern boundary with the adjacent property. To conclude, the site is within the defined settlement boundary and with the main built-up area of the village. The site maintains the grain and character of the area and surrounding existing dwellings. The site will utilise an existing access and hard standing area for parking and turning. No trees or hedgerows will be removed, and there will be no adverse impacts such as overshadowing or overlooking for any neighbouring property. The proposal has sought to overcome the issues and the tensions with the NDP policy as identified in the inspector's report. Overall, the policy complies with the revised National Planning Policy Framework, the Core Strategy Planning Policy, and fully complies with the NDP policies. There are no technical objections, and therefore officers are recommending approval. Thank you, members, and Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Roberta. And now we go to a presentation from our speakers. Can I invite Ms. Clark from Welsh Newton?
Good morning, Chairman, councillors. I'm here to represent the views of Welsh Newton and the Rotherham Parish Council. We wish to object to this application on the following grounds. The project does not satisfy either the spirit or the letter of the NDP policy WNC1, which states that the parish is not, in principle, opposed to new building so long as it meets the need for affordable housing, which this development does not. It is also contrary to the NDP policy WNL1, which is that any new build should enhance and not be detrimental to the local character, wildlife and habitat of the area. Again, this project certainly does not complement the local architectural vernacular. It does not represent organic growth, which would be a small single house, but is rather part of a development of one large house on this site and two others almost on an adjacent plot. Furthermore, it is contrary to the policy LD2, as there are European protected species, dormice, known to be living in the hedgerows surrounding the site. Not only would their habitat undergo general disturbance with all the building work, but breaches in the hedgerows surrounding the site will disrupt essential routes for the dormice colony. Disturbance of a European protected species is, as you know, punishable in law. The highway to the property is a narrow, winding lane, the only access to Welsh Newton Common, with few passing places and is unsuitable for an increase in traffic, particularly the nature of heavy vehicles used for a project building of this kind. And then the additional daily volume of vehicles implied by full occupation of a large executive-style three-bed property with a large double garage. There is concern that the drainage from the site will impact on the lower YSAC. As both parish councillors and residents, we have a duty to protect our wider environment. There is nothing in the application in response to climate and ecological emergency. This is of huge significance to us all, especially in view of this week's news on the rapid increase in the rate of damage caused by climate change. And I'd like to finalise by reminding the councillors that after a previous site visit in 2020, development at the site was unanimously rejected as it was considered unsuitable for the type and size of development planned. The overall impact of this development project has not, in essence, changed with this current application. Thank you.
Thank you. And safely within the 3-minute limit. Anyway, thank you. And now I ask Mrs. Parkinson, a local resident, to speak.
Thank you, Chair. There have been 39 letters of objection to this application from local residents. The application is part of an overall development of 3 houses on 2 different sites. Until very recently, it's been very challenging to get permission for new housing at Welsh Newton Common, so it feels like a very big change to us, and one that hasn't been welcomed, hence the number of objections. The application fails to demonstrate there's a need for it, and the NDP is clear that we want to support new housing that is led by need. An existing old stone building on the site could be converted to residential use and was identified in the neighbourhood development plan as a preferred redevelopment or conversion opportunity, rather than losing one of the small meadows that are a distinctive landscape feature of Welsh Newton Common. Well, the number of bedrooms hasn't been reduced since you last considered this. Has been reduced since you last considered the application. It remains a large house and won't fall into the affordable bracket, something we've identified as the main need in the community. The building of large new houses and extensions of others to increase their size is creating an exclusive area that locals who work in less well-paid jobs are unable to enter or remain in. And this creates an unbalanced community. The addition of a double garage to this proposal creates an opportunity for an easy conversion to more living space and therefore even higher financial value. The condition can easily be overcome, and similar development in the village hasn't even been completed before an application was made and approved to remove the no conversion of garage to bedroom condition. The site's bounded on each side by common land, defined in the NDP as protected green space. Additional housing in such a sensitive location will have an impact and will increase the urbanised look of the settlement in an incremental way. It will also add disturbance to the hedge to the north, which has held a population of dormice. The village is accessed by a narrow no-through road of a mile in length with few passing places. This limits growth of the village and is another reason why a need for housing here should be demonstrated in order for it to be truly sustainable. There are a couple of other issues. One is the sewage treatment plant and how it will interact with the existing septic tank and soakaway already in the ground to serve the stone barn and store. This hasn't been explored and there are no plans to show the route of the soakaway and sewerage tank to serve the proposed house. It would be reassuring to know there is space within the field for 2 septic tanks and soakaways. The other issue is the landscape and ecology mitigation plan, which was drawn up for the previous application and hasn't been updated. It includes trees and hedge planting, but as the site's no longer being divided, there are more limited opportunities for hedge planting, which would screen the site and provide greater benefit for wildlife. So we ask you to refuse the permission for this development. If you do decide to give permission for it, we already have a number of developments going ahead and they're causing a lot of damage to common land. And I would ask that you condition that the common land around both of the sites you're considering a large from is protected from being eroded by the vehicles that come to the building. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I now invite Ms. Bowden to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you. In the year or so prior to making the original application for one dwelling on this site, several residents had already suggested to me that I should build a house, so I wasn't expecting it to be a contentious application. One person even said that I'd be an asset to the village. I was therefore extremely surprised when this person, along with others, became the objector to my application. When the original application for a new 4-bedroom house on the site went to the parish council for discussion, a group of local people came to the meeting. In the chat they had with both me and the parish councils before the meeting started, these people made it very clear that they had not come to object to my application for a 4-bedroom house. One of them said, "We're not worried about the one house application, it's the other." In the first month that my original application had been publicly advertised, there were only 2 objections. One was from a person who was a regular objector to planning applications in the parish. I was therefore confident that local people were happy with my proposal and that it complied with all the policies. The NDP had not been adopted at this time. It was only when a campaign had been launched that the objections eventually started coming in. Excuse me. The parish council supported my original application for a 4-bedroom house. One of those who voted in support was my ward councillor, who is also on the parish council. As you can imagine, I was horrified when the same ward councillor gave an emotional speech to the planning committee against my proposal. My previous application on this site was dismissed as appeal by the planning inspector on one point only, the number of bedrooms. He said that the new dwelling should be 3 bedrooms, not 4. The planning inspector was happy with all other aspects of my application, including the ridge height that would be screened by the high hedge. However, in this new application, I decided to lower the ridge height anyway, in addition to reducing the number of bedrooms in order to comply with the NDP policies. I've seen no evidence of the hedge around this property. However, no new gaps will be created, so connectivity of any potential dormouse habitat will not be affected. I'd like to finish by quoting some comments made by my ward councillor when this application was discussed at the parish council meeting in January this year. She said, "The appeal was dismissed on specific grounds. You have to look at the policies and the grounds of the dismissal of the appeal and whether or not this resubmission was addressed to the grounds of the dismissal. The planning inspector is the senior authority in this regard, and appeals do tend to set a benchmark and those things as well for discussion. The inspector judged that it was not harmful to the character and appearance of the common and therefore complied with SD1 and SS6, but there was conflict with the NDP, WNL4 and RA2 as to whether or not it would be supplying the type of housing needed, which would be referred to paragraph 77 of the NPPF. It was for 4 bedrooms and exceeded the ridge height of 6 metres. It is now a 3-bedroom with 6-metre ridge height." In response to a comment made by another person at the meeting, my ward councillor said, "It's a good point about whether or not we represent the views of the community as well. but it's difficult if we haven't got a policy on which to hang those views. I believe that this new application addresses the issues raised previously and now complies with all relevant policies. I therefore ask you to consider supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. And now we will move to the ward member, Councillor Swinglehurst, who will be joining the meeting via Zoom. Councillor Swinglehurst.
Good morning, Chairman and members.
Just one moment, Councillor Swinglehurst. Could the members of the speakers return to the public gallery? Apologies. Right, sorry about that, Councillor Swinglehurst. Councillor Swinglehurst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Members may remember this application site as one that was refused against officer recommendation and the appeal subsequently dismissed. And it is important to acknowledge from the outset that the applicant has addressed the reasons for refusal that pertain to design and conflict with the NDP. The building as proposed is now 3-bedroom and the ridge height is 6 metres. There have been 2 letters in support of the application that point out the efforts of the applicant to comply with policy. However, there have been over 36 letters of objection that show the deeply held local feelings against this proposal, and that is the reason it is before you today. Residents of Welsh Newton Common do not feel that this little settlement, with absolutely no amenities, services or genuine choices in modes of travel, and with very slow broadband connectivity, should be considered sustainable in any meaningful way, and it is not appropriate as a location for more housing. One of the major constraints is the access. Members may recall from previous site visits the twisty, narrow track lane, which is the only way on and off the common. Despite the view of the area engineer, local objectors are very concerned about the proposed intensification of use, and they feel that it will have a severe impact on what is already a difficult situation. So, were they about the access that they commissioned their own road survey from Mark Baker Consulting, which concluded at para 6.1.2 that there are very limited opportunities for the use of sustainable modes of transport, that a safe and suitable access to the site cannot be achieved for all modes of travel due to the increase in conflicts on the substantially single track lane, that is the sole point of vehicular access, and that the residual cumulative impact of the development has to be by any reasonable definition classed as severe. It is therefore the view of the consultant that the application is in conflict with the NPPF and MT1 SS4 of the local plan. Furthermore, since the original application, there has been a substantial increase in delivery vehicle movements, both nationally and locally, and this is also impacting the road. 2 previous planning permissions are currently being implemented on Welsh Newton Common, and in both cases, the construction process has damaged the common, eroding verges and damaging grass and woodland areas. If the committee is minded to approve, it might be worth considering conditions to mitigate construction traffic impact or to ensure that the damaged areas are made good after construction. Local objectors are also of the view that the proposal is damaging to the character of Welsh Newton Common due to its size, even in the reduced design, and is in conflict with LD1 SS6. However, it is worth noting that this opinion was not shared by the planning inspector. Beauty is, as they say, in the eye of the beholder, but it is part of the character of the common for the housing to be separated by small areas of unimproved grassland. The existing housing has a low degree of intervisibility and has grown organically over time. The proposal would remove one of those little unimproved pastures and impact the rurality of the area. Although the current design meets the policy of the NDP, objectors are of the view that it does not provide the small affordable housing to meet local need that was envisaged when the plot was considered in paragraph 4.3.7 for its potential to provide accommodation through sympathetic conversion of the stone barn that is already there. It is clearly stated in the NDP that the conversion of existing structures is in preference to new buildings. It is therefore not in the spirit of the NDP, and given that the parish has exceeded the housing targets and the county has now exceeded the 5-year housing land supply, local objectors are of the view that it would not meet a local need, and therefore there is no reason to set aside this conflict with RA2 and WNC1. Welsh Newton Common is an environmentally sensitive site with populations of European protected species, including dormice. It's very important to ensure that hedgerows are protected and disturbance minimised. Dormice, great-crested Newton bats have been recorded proximal to the site, and the site itself will have a wildlife value that will be impacted by the development. This is in conflict with LD2, LD3, SS6 and WNL4. The intention to install photovoltaic panels, air source heat pumps and electric vehicle charging points is welcome in terms of overall sustainability. Local objectors are determined to protect their settlement from development. The common is a special place with valued biodiversity, European protected species and a feeling of tranquility of days gone by. The road access is inadequate, the service is non-existent, and there is no realistic alternative to travel by car. Whilst the applicant has responded to the inspector and previous decision positively, the local objectives do not feel that this development is needed or wanted in their community and ask you to refuse it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swinglehurst. We'll call upon you to sum up at the end of the meeting. Can I now open the debate, but remind members that we've had a refusal prior to this. We've had an appeal which was missed on the stated grounds as the officer has outlined, that we need to concentrate on whether this particular application has addressed those the grounds that the appeal inspector gave for the dismissal of the appeal. Are there any speakers? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. A question, if I may, to the planning officer. Is the footprint of the present application smaller than the original footprint?
It is larger, but it's including a double garage, which is attached to the property, whereas the original one didn't have the garage.
Thank you. My only other comment then, Chairman, is that understanding the concerns of the residents, it appears to me from what I'm reading that the applicant has done a good job in trying to meet the requirements of the original refusal and appears to have covered them. So at the moment, I reserve judgment just now, but at the moment I'm finding it difficult to see a reason for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have huge difficulties with this application because even though the bedrooms have been reduced to 3 bedrooms, I still think now the previous application didn't have the double garage. Now we have a double garage as well, which the planning officer has said increases the footprint of the building, which I think is not in the spirit of the NDP. And I feel that we need to really listen to the guardians of Welsh Newton Common who live there and who have obviously put a lot of time and effort into their NDP to protect the place where they live. And we have been given good reasons why this application shouldn't actually be approved. I don't think that this application is policy compliant. There are various policies that it doesn't comply with. I think that the traffic implications on Welsh Newton Common are significant. And although I know that there are no statutory objections to that, I still think that this is an unsustainable place to develop new housing. There is one road in and one road out, and that road is very limited. I think that the building is out of character with the settlement in Welsh Newton, and I would like to propose that we refuse this application because it is not in line with the NDP and is not compliant with sustainability policies within the national planning policy framework or our core strategy. I've got various policies that I think, I mean, SS6, conserving and enhancing the environmental assets and that constitute the county's distinctiveness, SS1 and various the local policies WNL4, WNC1, and also the impact on the Wye Valley SAC. Although Natural England have not objected, I don't actually hold much faith in Natural England's assessments anymore, so I'm afraid that I can't actually, we cannot say clearly that there is no impact on the Wye Valley SAC. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I officer, do you want to respond to that? I mean, the problem we have here is we have an inspector's report. And a number of those points he has not raised as grounds for refusal. Councillor, Mr. Bishop. Do you want to?
Yes, Chairman, you're quite correct there, and the professional officers of the council have identified that the issues relate to ecology, drainage, traffic, are all aspects which are covered by the report, by the application, and are not sustainable reasons to refuse the application.
We have, unlike many other applications where we're addressing them for the first time, we have to address them with the knowledge that some of these issues that we may be concerned, the inspector at appeal has not found them as sufficient to refuse. So we need to bear, and as I said earlier, on the grounds that the inspector dismissed the appeal on. Anyway, other speakers, she did propose. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Is that a seconder? Is that?
Sorry, I didn't hear the proposal.
So you didn't hear the proposal. Sorry.
Right. So I propose that we reject this application. I think I have reasons here, WNL4, WNC1, WNL1. I mean, I have several actually. I don't think that this is a sustainable development. So SS1, I mean, I can fine tune them if need be, but transport and sustainability, MT1, SS6, conserving and enhancing environmental assets of the county, and also LD1, the landscape and townscape. This is a protected area. The NDP has made it very clear that what kind of development they want. There is no need for housing in Welsh Newton Common. I think that we can actually, and as far as I understand, we are looking at this as a new application.
Oh.
Right. Well, I obviously you're the experts, but
I'm not the
still
expert,
feel we
but
should
I'm
reject it.
assured by experts that we're not. We have to bear in mind what has gone before. Sorry. Now, have I a seconder for Councillor Fagan's proposal? Councillor Wilding. Right. I don't have any other speakers at the moment. So, excuse me. Councillor Jones, sorry. So Councillor Jones, Rowan and Burke.
Yeah. Can I ask the question? Is the stable inn currently being used for horses and traffic to go in and out to?
It was on my side, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is in use, and you can see those other paraphernalia of equestrian use around there. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the opinion because it's as from the refusal from the earlier application, it's been brought to a 3-bedroom thatched house with a 6-metre roof line, and it's meeting a lot of environmental needs with ground source heating, photovoltaic solar panels, and electric charging, and they're keeping the existing trees, and it's using an existing access. At this stage, I note the objections, but at this point, I would support this application.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know about any of my other colleagues. I keep reaching for a microphone button.
Yes.
It's a habit we're going to have to get used to, I think. We'll go ahead to. I don't know how many times myself or anybody else in this committee has said, we go to site meetings and we have a look around and there's no buses, there's no shops, no place of worship, nowhere for a creche, nowhere mother and baby there. And this is exactly what we're looking at here. The other thing that's come to mind, yeah, the number of bedrooms has been reduced, but how big is a bedroom? Four bedrooms at 3.4 metres each is roughly the same size as 3 bedrooms at 4 by 5 metres each. It would be a good idea to have a footprint size rather than number of bedrooms. If it had been an open plan living area upstairs and been one big bedroom, would that have been far more acceptable? I don't know, these are just rhetorical questions. I am, however, governed by what I like to think is a sensible head, and the reduction in bedrooms, reduction in ridge height, the fact that it is 1.5 stories, affordable. Is it going to be affordable housing? Absolutely not. I don't know anybody who would look at a £400,000 completed house in one of the most beautiful parts of Herefordshire as affordable housing. I think that's absolute nonsense. But I'm afraid I'm going to be going with officer recommendation on this one. I don't see any other alternative. The applications are made and we have to deal with them as presented. That is how I see it. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think many of us have great sympathy for the parish council's objections, but unfortunately, we are probably also very much bound and, influenced by the comments made by the senior planning officer, chief planning officer, and our planning officer supporting this particular application, that it is a rehash, as you might say, of a previous application that was refused, and there's been a lot of work done to try and address the refusal reasons. And if we accept those reasons for refusal and the mitigation of them, and then go against the planning officer's advice and recommendation, I think that leaves us open to another appeal and a likelihood of that appeal being supported. And it might be very, very unfortunate, but I think we're between a rock and a hard place here with trying to understand the parish council's very strong feelings and yet having to try and comply with the planning inspector's report as well. It's a difficult one, but it's not a very easy one, I think.
Councillor Wilding.
Thanks, Chair. I just look at this design, and although I applaud the introduction of the PV panels and the heat pumps, etc., I just feel like the whole design does not look like it takes with enough urgency that it addresses the coming climate and ecological emergency. The design, for instance, just looks like some kind of townhouse that's just been plonked down in the middle of a field, that with the dormer windows and the roof space, although they say they're going to put on PV panels, I'd like to see a design that actually looks like it's been designed to take PV panels. This design does not look that way. If we're going to agree to a development like this, which is against local people's wishes, which is going to destroy ecological habitats, at least let's put a house there that really stands up to the sustainability test. This just does not. It's just an excuse to build a house. We want to see, all right, I'll rephrase that. I want to see designs that really reflect the need to look at the climate and ecological emergency. It's no good just making a design and then just whacking on a few solar panels. Thanks.
Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Chair. Could I start, Chair, by asking if any of our voices drop, if you could ask us to speak up a bit, because it may be my age, but I'm having difficulty hearing one or two speakers, certainly not Councillor Wilding anyway. So I will speak up myself. Endorsing what Councillor Rowan has said, when we did our site meeting for the previous application, I think we both struggled to find reasons within that community by which a new development can be genuinely said to be sustainable. There are no local services. Indeed, the only local service I found, which I seem to remember commenting upon somewhat to your amusement, Chair, was the primitive Methodist chapel, which itself indeed was no longer functioning. So it is no criticism of the existing residents there, who inevitably do have to depend on motor cars to get around, but we're simply compounding this unsustainability trend by further endorsing further developments whose occupants have no reference to the land, no genuine local reason to live, let alone work at Welsh Newton. So what are we doing? We're endlessly digging ourselves into a deeper and deeper hole by encouraging more and more embedded car-dependent behaviours with developments like this. It is a bit of a rant, but I do have to say, ladies and gentlemen, members and friends, that we must increasingly encourage, and I think that as Mr. Bishop reminded us when we started here, that we have a new or slightly revised NPPF to consider, because it embeds the principles of the Building Better Building Beautiful Commission. So it encourages us, albeit not necessarily to hang around policy, to consider how we can improve our design in all its aspects. I mean, I look at the double garage here. Now, a garage, if we have to have a garage, should be, as a utilitarian feature, should be tucked around the back. And here it is right stuck at the front of the building. It's an ugly thing. No car repository can be considered an object of beauty in its own right. And it just emphasises how chronically unsustainable in terms of its transport. Thank you, Chair. I say no more.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say, Chairman, I do get a little bit fed up with some of these arguments. The ward member reminded us that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Cars will be here, whether we like it or not, for donkey's years to come. The source of their energy might be electricity, it might be hydrogen, it might be fuel, whatever. There will be cars, and there's no way of getting around it. I understand from earlier speakers that a proposal to convert an existing building might have been looked upon more favourably. But another building, no matter how charming it might have been, would have meant another person with a car using the same narrow lane. So I fail to see the differences. And this nonsense about digging ourselves into holes over the climate crisis, etc., is not one that we're here to consider. We're here to consider an application where the applicant has gone out of their way to meet the requirements of the original refusal, appears to have done so. Our own officers find no other reason to refuse, and I believe we should be supporting the officer's recommendation on this case. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Summer.
I'll just second Councillor Johnson's comments on second passing.
Well, we've already got a proposal for refusal on the table. We may come to that. Yeah. Do you want to make comments now? Or?
No, that's fine.
That's right. Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak? Sorry, councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I also second the response? Could we have microphones in future, please? It was very difficult to hear some of the objections and the speakers in favour of the application, and the objectors also. I mean, there are no objections from the statutory consultees. Permitted development rights have been removed. Have I got that right? They have, haven't they? So I can see that we've really got no grounds to object to this application.
Right. Back on.
I would guess, yeah.
And now, before I go to Swindle, councillor Swindle, before we have the vote on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Not a good debate, not surprising the points raised. However, Welsh Newton Common is an area within your core strategy identified for development. We are moving forward with a new core strategy, and undoubtedly these areas will be looked at in greater detail yet again, but it is identified within the core strategy for development to take place. The local neighbourhood development plan identifies Welsh Newton Common. Proposals for new market housing will be supported. That's quite clear within their plan, because that follows down through from the core strategy, because they have to align. So you've heard that, yes, they came forward with an application previously, which was too tall, too many bedrooms. That was dismissed at appeal. They've listened to the inspector and they've revised their plans. They've reduced the height of it. They've reduced the number of bedrooms to 3. Yes, they may appear large bedrooms on the plan, but if you take into account the fact that the bedrooms are in the roof space, large proportions of those bedrooms are actually unusable because you can't stand up in them. So they are reduced in their size than what you would normally achieve. You've heard that the officers have identified that all the statutory consultees have raised no objections. That includes your ecology officer as well, who and the dormouses are included, I understand, within the ecology report, and that has been assessed. There's no hedgerows to be removed, and there's appropriate conditions which are attached to the application to justify to cover that aspect, as well as provide net biodiversity gain for the development as a whole. I've got concerns regarding the refusal reasons, whether they are sustainable, but obviously it's up to members now to consider that as part of their voting, and Councillor Swindlehurst will definitely come forward with her comments now. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, councillor Swindlehurst, perhaps you can make your coming up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members, for a very interesting debate. So I take it the first vote will be a vote on whether or not to refuse this application. Certainly that would be something welcomed by the local objectors. And I think the debate has touched on what is a kind of crucial issue, which is the sustainability of this location, despite it being included within the core strategy, which I know is as an RA2 settlement, which is I know not a conversation for right now, but it is something that I would flag at this point. Should the proposal to refuse fail, I would ask members, or remind members, to try to put something in to safeguard the common against the damage of construction vehicles. We are experiencing erosion and damage to verges and grassland and wooded areas with the buildings that are currently underway, and it would be welcome if something could be put in to offset that. And also to pick up on the point made by Councillor Wilding about whether or not these are sort of bolt-on bits in terms of the PV panels and so forth. The building has high thermal efficiency, but I would also like to ask if there's some way of ensuring that the PV electric vehicle charging points and so forth are put into the build and not just a promise. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll go to the vote. The proposed by councillor Fabian and seconded by councillor Wilding, I believe, with the mentioned policy on grounds of policies. Yeah, you can read them out.
Non-compliant with sustainable policies in the MPPF or the core strategy. We've got SS6, SS1, MT1, LD1, and the local policies WNL4, WNL1, and WNC1.
Right.
Yeah. There would be, I would raise serious reservations regarding a number of those policies because they do reflect the development which has got, but particularly MT1, which is a transportation, when this area is identified for growth. I'll let members move forward with the.
Yeah, I'll move forward with the vote. Can I now have those in favour of refusal on the grounds as the grounds that have been mentioned, read out now? Those in favour of refusal? Thank you. Those against refusal? Can I now move? I believe Councillor Johnson and Councillor Summers gave notice of a proposal to propose the officer's recommendation as laid out in our papers. Councillor Johnson, would you move that?
Yes, I would propose that the application is approved, Chairman, with the provisos mentioned by the ward councillor that it includes a responsibility to ensure minimum damage to the surrounding area and that any damage done is made good following completion.
Is that seconded by Councillor?
Second, and I agree.
So, Mr. Bishop, do you wish to?
Can I just, on that particular point, we've got condition number 15, which is the construction management plan, which will cover the construction traffic, etc. And that, so we will cover it with that aspect. Any damage outside of the site on common land is dealt with by other legislation, not by the planning, but we can deal with the construction traffic on the site and the parking on site as well. And as regards the local member also picked up regarding the ensuring that the sustainability measures are included within the development. We have condition number 22, but I would propose that we enhance that to include the PV panels, etc., because that just relates to the car charging points, etc. But those are also what we include the other sustainability measures, the PV panels and the air source heat pump, which have been identified, but that's all included to ensure that it's built integral to the development, not as a bolt-on facility.
Thank you. That's fine with me. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hagan, do you want to?
I'd just like to ask about the access across the common. Is it? I realise that is a different issue, and but surely it's acceptable to say that development can't continue until access is secured across the common.
They will need to obtain the appropriate authority to achieve that. Yes, from the Commons holder that title.
And so the question is that at which point is that achieved, attained? I mean, is that prior to development or prior to occupation, or how does that work?
Prior to, well, they would have access rights onto that field now, won't they? They would have access rights there at the present time. So, but that's dealt with under that legislation.
It doesn't answer my question actually. At which point?
I imagine, I don't know, but I assume that there is permitted access. Exists under common law.
There's an existing access there, so they already have access rights onto that land.
Okay, well, we have a proposal now for acceptance, plus the points that Mr. Bishop has made for the officer's recommendation as set out in the papers. Can I ask those in favour of approval on the grounds as set out? Those against? Any abstentions? None. Then that is motion is carried. Can I have a 10-minute short adjournment? We're back here in 10 minutes with Ms. Webster. Oh, waiting for the stream. We're not online yet. Slight delay. Thank you. Can I welcome you back to the meeting? Can I now request that the public speakers for agenda item 7 of the meeting, Mrs. Clark, Mrs. Parkinson and Ms. Bounton, take their seats again. Thank you. I'll call on you to speak after the officer's presentation. Ms. Webster.
Thank you, Chair. I refer you all to the update sheet where one further representation was sent direct to members via email over the weekend regarding the application. The points raised are answered within the officer's report or be covered by the presentation. The site is located within the settlement of Welsh Newton Common, shown by the red star on the map. Welsh Newton Common is identified within the core strategy, policy RA2, as a smaller settlement where proportionate housing will be appropriate. The site is not located within an area outstanding natural beauty conservation area. There are no listed buildings within the immediate vicinity, and there are no other designations on site. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the construction of 2 detached 1.5-storey 3-bedroom properties. Next slide, please. The application site comprises part of a field lying on the corner of St. Wolston's Road and a private street in the centre of Welsh Newton Common. The wider field benefits from 2 large beech trees and field shelter. The private road that runs along the southern boundary used to lead to a post office, which is now closed. The area exhibits a degree of openness, providing a sparsely populated character and appearance to the settlement, with an irregular pattern of development. The site is located within the settlement boundary defined within the Welsh Newton and Ganaroo Neighbourhood Development Plan, which was made September 2019. NDP policy WNL5 states that proposals for new market housing will be supported within the identified settlement boundary in Welsh Newton Common. This site has previously had an application refused by Planning Committee, application number 191286, which was for 3 dwellings and dismissed their appeal. Subsequently, an application number 200954 went to appeal for non-determination for 2 dwellings, which was dismissed due to a technical issue with the HRA. Next slide, please. The application site comprises the southwestern corner of the field with a proposed access directly from the private road on the southeastern boundary, providing a visibility display of 25 metres in each direction. The site is bounded by trees along the roadside, and while there is an access gate in the eastern corner into the wider field, this is not contained within the application site itself. The site is a flat field currently used for grazing. The block plan shows the dwellings to be set back from the road with sufficient curtilage to maintain the character of the surrounding dwellings. Next slide, please. Policy WNL4 of the NDP states that care should be taken to ensure the building's height, scale and form do not disrupt the visual amenities of the immediate surroundings or impact adversely on any significant wider landscape views. Building materials are encouraged to retain the character of the settlement, and design should be informed by the distinctive local character of the rural area. Bridge height should not exceed 6 metres. The dwellings proposed are detached, 1.5 storey, 3-bedroom properties with communal living space on the ground floor and bedrooms above. The ridge height is for the proposed dwellings is 6 metres. Both dwellings will be constructed from facing stonework on the front elevations with areas of render on the other elevations, with natural slate roofs and aluminium timber windows with dormer windows. Plot 1 has 203 square metres of usable floor space and has an attached garage off the south-east elevation. Parking and turning area will be to the front of the properties, with private amenity space to the side and rear of both properties. Next slide, please. This plan shows the elevations for plot 2, the southernmost plot of the two. This dwelling has a detached garage to the front of the property. The existing trees along the southern boundary adjacent to the roadside will be maintained, with the exception of 1 tree to allow for access into the site. The local authority tree officer has no objections to the proposals. New native hedgerow will be planted around the remainder boundaries to the north, east and west. The local authority area engineer has no objections to the proposals and states that traffic flow data sets out low peak hour flows commensurate with the character and usage of the highway network. To ensure the construction phase is suitably managed, a construction management plan is conditioned, which will need to include delivery routing and timing where possible to avoid natural peaks in traffic flow. Next slide, please. As stated earlier, the site is located within the settlement boundary. NDP policy WNL5 states that proposals for new market housing will not be supported within the identified settlement boundary in Welsh Newton Common. Policy WNL5 further states that proposals should be small in scale for 1 or 2 properties and developed should adjoin clusters of existing buildings and not be isolated sites away from other housing. The proposals will be expected to demonstrate particular attention to the form, layout, character and setting of the site and its location within Welsh Newton. New housing should be accessed directly from a Baydock road. House sizes should be limited to a maximum of 3 bedrooms to help address the local shortage of small affordable units for young families. The proposals are to connect to a shared private treatment plant with associated groundwater safeway drainage field, which is within the applicant's ownership. The HRA has concluded that there are no pathways for any remaining nutrients, including phosphates, to enter the River Wysap from the foul and surface water scheme as proposed. Natural England have also confirmed no objections to the proposal. The land drainage officers have concluded no objection to the proposals in their comments, stating that they do not object or have concerns in regard to the foul water drainage strategy, providing a management plan is conditioned to outline the responsibility and maintenance of the package treatment plant and drainage field. The local authority's ecologist stated in his comments that the original ecological reports and relevant mitigation and working methods were sufficiently thorough and detailed such that no updates considered as being necessary in support of this new application. The report provides clear details of relevant formalised ecological working methods, mitigation and enhancement measures. With all works to be supervised by a suitably licensed ecological clerk of works. These recommendations are to be secured through conditions. The ecologist also recommended that ecological working methods and mitigation measures detailed within the Wilder Ecological Report, including for Great Crested Newt, should be conditioned. The previous application on this site was the subject of an appeal for non-determination, which was dismissed, but on the sole grounds that the inspector concluded that there was insufficient certainty in relation to the long-term maintenance of the drainage solution to conclude that there be no likely significant effect on the River Wysap. The inspector stated in his decision that the proposed 2 dwellings would preserve the character and appearance of the area in accordance with the core strategy and NDP documents and policies, which amongst other things seek to ensure that proposals are appropriately designed and respond to the local context. Members will note that there is a condition being included in the report for the management of the drainage. Next slide, please. Photographs show the internal area of the site with the proposed 2 dwellings utilising the southwestern corner of the field. The remainder of the field maintains to be within the applicant's ownership. The property that can be seen beyond the boundary in the top right photograph is that of the adjacent property to the site, Steeplands. Next slide, please. This photograph is an image from an outside the site, standing at the corner of St. Austell Road and the private street from where the access will be proposed, off to the left of this picture. The gateway shown at the corner is the existing gateway for the field. To conclude, the site is within the defined settlement boundary and within the main built-up area of the village. The site maintains the grain and character of the area and surrounding existing dwellings, as concluded also by the planning inspector of the previous application. Although it is acknowledged that there will be a loss of a tree and some hedgerows to allow for the access and visibility space, it is mitigated through the additional native hedgerow planting to take place around the remainder of the site. Overall, the proposal complies with planning policy and complies with the NDP policies. With no technical objections and the management conditions, condition 21, which overcomes the concerns of the planning inspector, and therefore officers are recommending approval. Thank you, members and chair. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Webster. Can I now invite Ms. Clark to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. We wish to object to this application on the following grounds. The project does not satisfy either the spirit or the letter of the NDP policy WNC1, which states that the parish is not, in principle, opposed to new building so long as it meets the need for affordable housing, which this development of 2 large family houses blatantly does not. It is also contrary to the NDP policy WNL1, which is that any new build should enhance and not be detrimental to the local character, wildlife and habitat of the area. This project certainly does not complement the local architectural vernacular. It does not represent organic growth, which would be a small single house, but is rather part of the development of 2 large houses on the site and another on an adjacent plot. Furthermore, it is contrary to the policy LD2, as there are European protected species dormice known to be living in the hedgerows on the site. Not only would their habitat undergo general disturbance with all the building works, but there would be breaches in hedgerows surrounding the site, which are essential routes for dormice colony to exist. In addition to the disturbance and loss of habitat of the European protected species, which I'm sure, as you know, is punishable by law, the hedgerows earmarked for removal are on common land as such and should not be removed without relevant approval. On an important note, access to the site is over common land and there is no express approval for such access. The highway to the property is narrow, winding lane, the only access to Welsh Newton Common with very few passing places and is unsuitable for an increase in traffic of this capacity, particularly the nature of the heavy vehicles used on a building project such as this. And then the additional daily volume of vehicles implied by full occupation of 2 and 3 bedroom houses. There is concern that the drainage from this site will impact on the lower YSAC. As both parish councillors and residents, we all have a duty to protect our wider environment. There again is nothing in the application in response to climate and ecological emergency and is of huge significance. As a final point, I would like to again reiterate and remind the councillors that after a previous site visit in 2020, development at the site was unanimously rejected and it was considered unsuitable for the type and size of development planned. The overall impact of this development project has not changed with this current application. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, can I ask a local resident, Mr. Parkinson, to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm representing the views of myself and neighbours in the community, many of whom are here today, against this planning application. There have been 38 individual objections to it. If a need had been demonstrated for this application, it might counteract the damage it would do to local character, biodiversity and the environment. Our parish has already exceeded its quota of new housing. This application will result in the loss of part of an unimproved meadow, sections of mature species-rich hedgerow, not just one tree, I don't think, both identified in the NDP, its protected landscape features. I've already mentioned the inadequacy of the access road to cope with more housing and the traffic that it brings. Our NDP preference is for smaller, affordable houses that are needs-led. As a community, we feel the size and scale of these executive-style houses is inappropriate for the local context and will have a negative impact on its character. There have never been 3 large executive homes built on the common at once. But this is the first application to my knowledge where housing has been proposed that is not led by the need for families to remain living locally to support their older or younger generations. Our NDP plan policy WNL5 states that new housing should be accessed directly from a made-up road. This phrase was recommended by the planning inspector who examined the NDP specifically. She mentioned it specifically to protect the land accessed from rough tracks across the common from development. This site is accessed from one of those tracks. In the committee report, it is described as a private road. Additional traffic along the track will erode our common land, which is protected in the NDP as local green space. It's clear that the inspector who examined our NDP expected the phrase made-up road to be understood as tarmac surface roads that are maintained by the council. We remain concerned that the drainage associated with this development and our questions have not been answered satisfactorily. Firstly, the foul water treatment facility is on land retained by the applicant, not by the new houses. We aren't confident that anyone will be responsible in the event of a pollution incident or a power failure, for example, which happens regularly where we live and on which these facilities rely. Secondly, the ground sloping away from the site already has a land drain, so foul water and rainwater might cause flooding on neighbouring ground and onto the road to the north. We don't think it's good enough to say these matters will be decided after planning permission is granted, because too much can go wrong. There are 2 European protected species that are threatened by this development. The great-breasted newts feeding in a pond 50 metres from the site. We have surveyed them. And they will use the surrounding land, including the development site, to disperse and feed. Dormice live in the hedges around the development site. The construction will remove part of the hedge in 2 places, not just one. New hedging proposed around the site prior to development will take several years to mature to suitable habitat. The existing hedges will form garden boundaries. The existing hedges are untidy and clad in ivy. They're great for wildlife, but they're not really domestic hedges, and the new residents will want to tidy them up and to reduce the height. If this happens, their value for dormice and their other wildlife will be lost. Dormice are being reintroduced in places where habitat loss has caused extinction. Wouldn't it be better to prevent destruction of their habitat in the first place where they're present? For all of these reasons, we don't consider this development to be sustainable, or we ask you to reject it again.
Thank you. Ms. Bowden, finally.
Thank you. My initial application on this site that was recommended for approval by the planning officer was refused by the planning committee last year because a number of bedrooms in the ridge heights did not comply with the NDP policies that had been adopted several months after I submitted the application. I therefore submitted a revised proposal last year.
Mr. Bowden, could you just speak up a little bit? Some of
Sorry.
the members are having difficulty.
I therefore submitted a revised proposal last year addressing these issues and complying with the newly adopted NDP. I appealed against non-determination of this revised application at the same time as I appealed against the decision of the first one. The local authority did not raise any objections to my revised proposal. I will now quote some of the comments made by my ward councillor when the current application that is being considered today was discussed at the parish council meeting earlier this year. She said the first appeal was dismissed because the planning inspector judged the 2 4-bedroom houses would harm the character and appearance of the settlement. The second appeal for non-determination was dismissed for different reasons. The planning inspector felt that the 2 3-bedrooms and lower ridge height had overcome the character and appearance objection, and that there had been a residual resist to the YSAC because the management of the sewage system had been resolved if it was going to appeal. The application being considered today is the same as the revised application last year, an application that the local authority did not object to. To address the planning inspector's concerns, I was advised to employ a planning solicitor to draw up a section 106 agreement relating to the management of the shared package treatment plant. The draft agreement was sent to the planning officer in January this year. However, the planning officer decided that 106 agreement was not necessary and that the issue could be resolved by a 30-year management condition instead. I hope that the planning committee find this acceptable, and I don't think there's any reason I've been told that they shouldn't. But if they don't, I do have a copy of the legal agreement here today that was formally lodged with the Herefordshire Council about 7 months ago. I believe that the planting of a substantial length of new hedge to the rear of the proposed development will offer a significant biodiversity gain. In particular, it provides a new habitat for dormice. Some of the objectors to this application have already taken advantage of greenfield sites in their ownership and have built houses on them. Some of these have new accesses created across the common land. It also seems rather strange that these people chose to launch a campaign against my proposal when there were no objections whatsoever to a recent new 3-bedroom house on a greenfield site made by applicants who already had a house in the village, so did not have a need from a planning policy perspective. I'd like to make a couple of points based on what's been said today. Firstly, I've owned this property for 11 years and I've never damaged the common, as some other residents have. I do care about the common lands, so I would welcome a condition protecting the common from damage during building work and construction. I don't want to see the common damaged either. Also, a quick comment about the access. There's only a very short piece of private track, and this is part of what a road that was used to access the post office.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you now. We've got over 3 minutes.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, if you can now please go to the public gathering. Thank you. And I now invite Councillor Swinglehurst, who is speaking to us via Zoom, to make her presentation. And opening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. So as you might imagine, much of I might say has already been said in speaking to the Woodside Stables application. I'm not going to repeat myself and try your patience, but I will précis those points that pertain. The previous application was refused at committee against officer recommendation. The appeal was dismissed. The new application has taken both decisions into account and addressed the reasons for refusal. The intention to install photovoltaics, air source heat pump and electric vehicle charging points is noted and welcome to improve the overall sustainability of the proposal. However, local objectors are of the view that Welsh Newton Common is not a sustainable location for development because it has no services, the broadband speed is glacial, the water is on a pump supply and there is no mains drainage. The access road is not adequate. The impact on the local network, according to Mark Barker Consultants, would be severe, and there is no realistic alternative to car travel. The development proposed would be injurious to the character of the common. It would increase intervisibility and density, remove an area of unimproved species-rich grassland, reduce the existing hedgerow, and there is no evidence of the proposal meeting local need. Housing targets have been exceeded locally, and the county now has over the 5-year housing land supply. The high biodiversity value of the common has to be considered. This site involves known dormouse, great crested Newton bat habitat and is within the Wye Valley SAC. The access points will require removal of hedgerow, which is known to be dormouse habitat. Fragmenting the foraging routes in this way will have a detrimental impact on this European protected species, and it is vital that any future owner knows not to disturb the dormice or to tidy the hedge understory. Sadly, very few people have this understanding, and most just want to see hedges looking tidy. There is no way of controlling or conditioning this element. Therefore, the dormouse habitat will be at risk if this development goes ahead. Whilst there is a planting scheme in mitigation, it will take years to establish. Even when it is established, there is no way of protecting the dormouse from over-enthusiastic hedge trimming. Because the harm to at least one European protected species cannot be mitigated or avoided, the development is in conflict with NPPF 175 and LD2 as doing harm to species of European importance and should be resisted. Unlike the application at Woodside Stables, this application is not accessed directly from the tarmac road. The NDP restricts housing development to sites accessed directly from, quote, a made-up road. Although the track is stoned and is used to access other houses, it is unclear whether it meets the NDP description of made-up road. This was included as a limiting factor by the inspector, who drew a distinction between, quote, narrow unmade roads to access areas of the settlement and made-up roads. Given the intention was to limit development, it is possible to construe the phrase made-up road as meaning tarmac surface and narrow unmade road to indicate the stone tracks that are used to access housing. If that is the case, then this site is not accessed from a made-up road and is not compliant with this element of the NDP. The site is overlooking one of the very few open areas of the common that are left. It is therefore in this context of above average significance. The character of the settlement is scattered housing interspersed with small paddocks, grassland, hedgerows and trees. The development would represent a tremendous change to the character of this area of the common. Local objectors do not want to see that change to the place where they live. They can see no reason for it. There is no need. Targets have already been exceeded within the parish. What is needed, they feel, is to preserve this precious habitat, to protect the endangered species and keep the common as the special place that they know and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, just I'll open up the debate, but can I remind members, we are like the previous item on the agenda, we are to deal with the points that have been outlined in the inspector's refusal on this planning application prior to this meeting. Perhaps Mr. Bishop will expand on that.
Yes, just to say, Chairman, it is a new application, obviously, and it has to meet all the criteria. But you have that position where an inspector has already reviewed all the aspects of the proposal and only dismissed the appeal relating to the section 106, which was found not to be required now. So that is the only aspect that the inspector found was wanting with the application. Everything else he found was acceptable. So to move forward with trying to refuse an application on grounds where an inspector has already found acceptable will be very difficult to defend. So.
Right, I open up the debate. Can anyone wish to speak to this? Councillor Fagan.
Thank you. I accept what Mr. Bishop's saying about the inspector, but an inspector has also said when they develop the neighbourhood development plan that all development should be off a made-up road, and this is clearly not a made-up road. So I immediately have reservations about that. I think we as a committee cannot just run roughshod over our neighbourhood development plans, which is what is happening here. The cumulative effect now, we've passed one house, now we're looking at another two, in a wholly unsustainable location for new housing, and probably in the next iteration of the core strategy we'll identify that, and I understand the constraint. But we do have an NDP, and the NDP does sit at the top of the sort of planning hierarchy, and I feel we need to actually take into account what the NDP is saying. We also need to take into account the NPPF paragraph 175, which talks about protected species. We've got dormice here. Contrary to LD2, we are looking at the removal of hedgerow, which will certainly threaten dormice territory, and also there are implications on crested newts here. Again, all of this sort of identifies that this is not a sustainable location for new development. I just cannot support this application because it is coming up, the entrance is off the track, it's not a made-up road, and I would like some clarification on that, please, of the issue of the made-up road. I don't think it's acceptable to lose hedgerow or mature trees for this development. It doesn't comply with WNC1, meeting the need for affordable housing, or WNL1, enhance the local character, and is contrary to the other policies that I've mentioned. So I can't support that, and I would again ask the committee to refuse this application.
Is that a proposal?
It is.
Can you have the grounds?
Yes, I do. I can list them here. NPPF paragraph 175, WNC1, WNL1, LD2, and again, SS6 and SS1. This is not a sustainable location for further development. What we are doing is urbanising Welsh Newton Common.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Mill. Bishop, do you want to comment on those particular points?
Only they're not sustainable in terms of reasons for refusal. The planning inspectors quite clearly accepted development of the site, subject to an agreement being reached regarding to the drainage. The sustainability of the site, as I've said before, of the area is quite clear. It's identified within your core strategy for development to take place. That is why you are meeting your 5-year housing land supply now, because you are granting permissions such as this.
I've got no speaker. Councillor Johnson.
A question, please, Chairman, if I may, perhaps Mr. Bishop. In 3.2 of the report, the last couple of lines, apparently the inspector said, even though appeal B is acceptable in relation to effects on character and appearance, it must be dismissed in relation to uncertainty relating to mitigating significant adverse effects on the integrity of the River Wye SAC. Are you able to clarify that for me? I'm confused.
Yes, the inspector had reviewed the details of the drainage, and he wasn't satisfied that there was sufficient management and maintenance of that facility to protect the SAC. That is now controlled by a condition which is proposed on this permission.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This matter of the track, is it legitimate access? Is the track a made-up track and proper in every way for the access to be legitimate? There seems to be a certain amount of disagreement here with the parish council and the NDP and the, what should we say, the officer's recommendation. Could we have clarification on that, please?
Within the NDP, there is no actual definition of what a made-up track is. The made-up road within the policy WL5 came from the examiner's report. So St Wolston's Road is tarmacked and runs to the centre of the settlement. And in my report, in the officer's report, paragraph 6.13 there, I just detail there about the fact that it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that it constitutes more than one made-up road throughout the village. And in addition, the former post office is just below this site, so it would have been accessed off this road. So it's difficult. There's no definition of it within the NDP to give you full clarification of what a made-up road would be.
Yes, so you can really make up your own mind as to whether it's a made-up road or not. But in technical terms, Mr. Bishop, you would agree that this is a made-up road and a legitimate access?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Milne.
I'm simply going to say that section 329 of the Highways Act 1980 includes a definition of made-up road as being a carriageway or part thereof which has been metalled or in any other way provided with a surface suitable for the passage of vehicles. So I would take that as having a barren surface.
Can I say, as I have one on a bridle path, which is, if it has been stone in the tracks, it's considered to be a made-up road. In other words, there's been something done to the track to make it more accessible, and it can be quite limited, as I know very well myself. I've just dealt with it with English nature. Anyway. But the term is very loose as far as general, there is no exact definition. Are there any other speakers? None. Then we've had a proposal and a seconder. Sorry? Yeah, no. I'll go to Mr. Bishop, perhaps who wants to sum up points before we go to the local member.
Yes, just to say, Chairman, that I've got serious reservations regarding a refusal of this application relating to the potential for the council to defend a situation where we have had a previous appeal on this site where all these matters have been proved to be acceptable. Chairman.
Thank you. Now I'll go to Councillor Swinglehurst to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Clearly this, although there's a lot of similarities between this application and the previous application, there is, because it is for two houses rather than a single house, the issues that are raised in the previous application are, to all intents and purposes, doubled in terms of the increased road usage and so forth. The ambiguity of the phrase made-up road, I'm grateful to members for the definitions that they're coming up with, but nevertheless, I do think it's something to consider in this application. And again, as with the previous application, I am going to remark on the impact that is already being made to the common by permissions given in terms of erosion. And I know the applicant would not wish to see any damage to the common. Nevertheless, I want to flag this so that we are all aware and can do what we can to mitigate any impact should the committee be minded to approve this application. Thank you.
Right, we have a proposal and a second, proposed and seconded by Councillor Fagan and Councillor Mill, seconded by Councillor Mill, to refusal for the reasons as outlined by Councillor Fagan. Can I have those in favour of refusal? Those against? And that is refused. I now have a proposal. It's lost. And I now have a proposal, further proposal for approval according to the officer's recommendation. Councillor Rowe, followed by Councillor Johnson. Right, those in favour?
Chairman, can I just ask that the previous additions to the conditions we put on the previous application are also included on this one as well?
I was going to ask for exactly that. Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
Does that include extra protection for dormice?
That protection is already on there by condition 22 of your papers.
I thought it was. I was going to confirm confirmation. Thank you.
Okay. Can I now ask for those in favour of the proposal of adopting the officer's recommendation for approval? Those in favour? Those against? Okay, and that is carried. Can we now move on to the third application, which is for those variation of condition 10 of planning for previous planning. Councillor Wilding.
Yeah, Chair, since I've got an interest here, I'm going to leave. And since it's the last application, I'll actually leave the meeting if that's okay.
And Councillor Watson, I believe, is going to be acting as the local member for this particular item. We have one virtual speaker, one speaker who will represent physically, and a written submission. So if the member of the public who is going to, I believe, representing Parish Council will take their place.
The residents.
Sorry?
I'm representing the residents of the Parish Council.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Right, then we'll move over to our officers who will make a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. First, if I can just draw members' attention to the update. It summarises further comments that we've received from the preservation of rural beauty, and also an amendment to a reference to the MPPF in the report to reflect the renumbering of that paragraph following the publication of the latest MPPF iteration. These do not alter the report or the recommendation as advised. The site subject to this application lies to the south of the M50 between the B4224 and Fordings Lane. As demarked by the two red stars, it comprises two parcels of land either side of a body of water known as Harpenden Water. Next one. The site plan indicates the two areas subject to this application in red. This and the aerial image below provide a view of the surrounding context, which comprises a further body of water known as Drummond's Dove and South Herefordshire Golf Course, set in a rural landscape. Next slide, please. As set out in paragraph 1.3 of the report, planning permission was granted in 1999 for 22 holiday chalets and parking facilities at Hartleton Water. This comprised 16 buildings to the southwestern side of the lake, referred to as the village, and 6 buildings to the northwest, referred to as Lakeside. Each building comprises 2 units of holiday accommodation, equating to 44 units in total. Subsequently, a revised planning permission was granted at appeal in 2000, which deleted condition 11 and varied conditions 5 and 10 of the original planning permission. As set out in paragraph 1.4 of the report, this is an application under section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, and it seeks permission to vary the wording of condition 10 of the 2000 planning permission that was granted at appeal to specifically include all the approved drawings as a standard practice now, but was not at the time the application and appeal were determined. This application seeks only to ensure that condition 10 is precise by listing all approved plans rather than just 2, as per the appeal decision. To be clear, this application does not seek a proof of revised plans, as was the previous case for the application that was refused and then appealed in 2000. Condition 10 of the 2000 permission states that the development hereby permitted shall not be carried out except in complete accordance with the details shown on the submitted plans, numbered B278110 and L27315. This amended condition 10 of the earlier permission, which states the proposed development should be carried out in accordance with the approved plans. The site location plan at the top of the slide outlines the area of land in the applicant's ownership at that time. And in blue, the 2 parcels of land subject, start again. That doesn't make sense. The site location plan at the top of the slide outlines the area of land in the applicant's ownership at that time in blue, and the 2 parcels of land subject to the application in red. At the bottom left of the slide is the site plan for the village element to the southwest of the lake, and on the bottom right, the lakeside component to the northeast of the lake. Next slide, please. This application to vary condition 10 of the 2000 permission can only be valid if the permission is extant. This means that a lawful commencement needed to have taken place on or before the 19th of April 2004 to have implemented the planning permission and thereby preserve it in perpetuity. To achieve a lawful commencement, section 56 of the 1990 Act governs when development is taken to have begun. Where the development consists of the carrying out of operations, as is the case here, it will be taken to be initiated at the time the operations are begun, and provides that these must be a material operation. A material operation is defined in section 56(4). Of the list, D provides for any operation in the course of laying out or constructing a road or part of a road. As set out in paragraphs 5.12 to 5.16 of the report, the council confirmed to the applicant in writing on the 5th of February 2004 that a material operation had been carried out, and case law corroborates this position. In addition, contemporaneous correspondence confirmed that the council was satisfied that pre-commencement conditions had been complied with and discharged. Objections have challenged whether the material operation undertaken can be relied upon to have implemented the planning permission on the basis that the position of the access works accord with the approved landscaping plan rather than the site plan. These plans are shown on the slide, with the area where the access works were undertaken shaded in red on the landscape plan. At paragraph 5.20 of the report, extracts of these plans highlight the differences between the plans and the siting of the access. In general terms, case law confirms that operations carried out in breach of a condition cannot be relied on as a material operation capable of commencing development. However, subsequent case law has established that application of that general principle must be applied with common sense and with regard to the particular facts of the case in question. Here, the local planning authority were fully aware that the commencement was in accordance with the landscape plan rather than the site plan, took no enforcement action in the 10-year period for a breach of condition, and in fact confirmed that the commencement had taken place. Furthermore, no legal challenge was made by any third party despite them being aware of this discrepancy. On the basis of the facts of this case and the legal precedent referred to in the report, it is considered that the permission has been validly implemented and therefore remains extant. The report also sets out why this application is valid in terms of referencing the later permission granted at appeal and the validity of that permission. Next slide, please. These photographs show from top left in a clockwise direction the village area looking across the lake in a southerly direction, the lakeside area looking across the lake in a northerly direction, the village area with access to Hartleton Farm in the foreground and the access works beyond, and then the access works considered to constitute a material operation which has implemented the Planning Commission. The 1998 and 1999 application files are not in good order and do not include a complete set of stamped approved drawings. However, following review of earlier files, it is apparent that the development proposals have been subject to rolling applications which date back to the 1980s. It has therefore been possible to achieve a list of drawing references that were subject to approval and supplement these with a subsequently approved landscaping plan. Due to the age of these plans, some of which have been saved as microfiche, their quality is not that of current standards. As a result, using the scale bar and annotated dimensions, drawings of improved quality have now been submitted. The identified drawings are listed in the revised wording of the condition, now number 8, following renumbering, as set out in paragraph 5.32 of the report. To conclude, the remit of this application is narrow and confined to determination of whether there is an extant permission to vary the condition of, and if the drawings represent the approved scheme. As set out in the report, it is considered that there is an extant permission following a thorough assessment and a review of case law, which is a subject of council opinion. On this basis, it is considered that permission should be granted to vary the wording of the condition subject to this application to list the approved drawings. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I now invite Mr. Reeves, representing Linton Parish Council, to speak as a virtual participant. Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been 21 representations from the local community, all of which have been objections. Linton Parish also do not want the proposed development to proceed. We are of an opinion that the existing permission is unimplementable due to the loss and confusion around key plans referred to in earlier decisions, a matter which other speakers will no doubt expand upon. Additionally, we are concerned that conditions 5 and 7 cannot be monitored nor enforced. Condition 5, that the chalets be used for holiday accommodation only and not permanent residences. Condition 8, that the access be exclusively from the golf course entrance, yet SatNav will direct much traffic down Fordings Lane with its blind bends and lack of passing places. Focusing now on condition 10 and the building materials to be used, and noting that the site is very visible from the M50 motorway and that there are several grade 2 listed buildings surrounding this site. I refer back to the inspector's report of July 2000, where he stated that the control established by this condition should not be relaxed, as the original permission was approved as an exception to normal planning policies. Indeed, in the 34 years since permission was granted, nothing has happened at this site beyond a small, ill-defined scraping stroke hard standing. So it seems unlikely that this development will ever take place in its current format. That is, so long as these very important conditions are not relaxed nor become unclear or confusing, a position which we have already reached regarding the identification of the approved plans. If the councillors are minded to approve this application today regarding the clarification of condition 10, then we must not repeat the mistakes of the past where references to a plan have been insufficient. Even in today's committee report, the cross-referencing to locate the crucial letter of the 9th of December 2003 were unclear and incomplete. Herefordshire Council's proposed condition 1 should therefore be made even clearer and state overtly that the building materials required are the natural stone as used at Halfland Farmhouse and Spanish natural slates, and that the materials for doors and windows will be of timber construction. Similar clarity must also be achieved for the proposed reimposed conditions 2 and 6 in relation to landscaping and drainage. The reimposed conditions as currently set out are not explicit enough to remove the chance of future misinterpretation, and this must be remedied if and before this application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. And now can I invite Mr. Arrowsmith, to a local resident, to speak.
Morning, thank you. So I have 2 points to make. The first point is what is being included for approval in the current application is very unclear. The application now includes building types A, B, C, and D. Only type D is considered accepted by the planning inspectorate in his letter of 2000 for the village, and type B for the lakeside development. The landscape and site plans are also included in this application, but the site plan differs substantially from the landscaping plan in terms of siting the access road. The access road has been marked out as a scraping in the dirt with no defined boundaries. It's referred to as site access, but is marked on the plan as leading to a car park. It's not an access to the site as shown on all the other approved plans. It's 50 metres away from where it should be on the plan. The large site plan drawn by the applicant's own surveyor in 2005 actually neglects to show that that activity has taken place. There's no evidence of that scrape. It's also noteworthy that the developers have tried unsuccessfully on 4 separate occasions to remove condition 10 completely. Second point, it's unclear as to whether planning permission is extant. In 2004, as the planning officer said, scraping of soil was deemed to be sufficient as the start of planning permission, but no further work has been done in the last 17 years. Whether this minimal operation is enough to make planning extant has been questioned previously. Examples include that when the site was sold in 2007, solicitors acting for the purchaser wrote to Hereford County Council saying that if planning permission was not extant, then Hereford Council would be liable for damages. Herefordshire Planning responded that it accepts no responsibility for any damages or the like referred to in the letters. In October 2020, when this application went in, the initial reaction from Hereford Planning to this current application was that the work has not been carried out in accordance with the site plan you now wish to be agreed as being part of the grant of planning permission. This leads me to the view that it has not been established that lawful commencement has taken place. The agent for the developer refuted this claim, and the latest legal advice that's been given to planning. We now see that there's been a 180-degree turn, 180-degree reversal in the fact that they now think planning permission is extant. Finally, it seems the fundamental principles that apply to permissions should be that they should be open, fair, and consistent. That does not seem to apply in this case. We are all in the position where we need to have lawyers to interpret this application, not planners or planning officers. In summary, this application seeks to detail previously approved drawings. They're very unclear.
I'm afraid you've exceeded your time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, sir.
Can I now call on Mr. Boone, applicant, who has made a written submission?
Representation by David Bowen, planning consultant, in support of application 201961. This application is unusual in that it deals with matters which occurred over 20 years ago in 1999. The planning merits of the 1999 application were considered at that time based on the adopted development plan for the area, and planning permission was duly granted. The current application does not involve any consideration whatsoever of the planning merits of the permission granted in 1999. However, in the absence of complete records of all approved drawings in the council's decision notice, this application seeks to fully define all the approved drawings forming part of that planning permission. Mrs. Atkins has presented members with a comprehensive report detailing the facts of the current application. During the course of considering the current application, council obtained expert legal advice from Planning Council, and based on the material facts and applicable case law, it is considered by officers that the 99 Planning Permission has been validly implemented and remains extant. The only remaining impediment to full implementation of the Planning Permission is the lack of clarity of all the approved drawings forming part of the Planning Permission. During the period since planning permission was granted in 1999, neither the council nor the applicants have retained copies of all of the stamped approved drawings. Whilst this is unusual, given that councils have a legal duty to retain such records within the planning register, as illustrated by the facts of this case, file records do occasionally go astray. Planning inspectors and the courts have held that where documentary records are missing, it is proper to consider evidence from individuals concerned and to base decisions on a balance of probabilities rather than beyond a reasonable doubt. The applicable burden of proof in criminal cases. The applicant prepared a statutory declaration under the Statutory Declarations Act 1835, solemnly and sincerely declaring that declaration to be true. This declaration forms part of the current application and lists each of the applicable individual drawing references detailed in this application. The objectors to this application have made concerted efforts to secure its refusal, including appointing their own planning counsel to advise on the status of the 99 Planning Permission and the legality of the current application. Notwithstanding those efforts, no one has been able to present any evidence whatsoever, and the facts detailed within the statutory declaration sworn by the applicant are inaccurate. The court held in Gamitas against SSE and Newham LBC 1985 that the applicant's own evidence does not need to be corroborated by independent evidence in order to be accepted. If a council has no evidence of its own to the contrary or forms or from others to contradict or otherwise make the applicant's version of events less than probable, there is no good reason to refuse the application, provided that the applicant's evidence alone is sufficiently concise and unambiguous to justify the grant of permission on the balance of probability. The applicant's sworn declaration is sufficiently precise and unambiguous in all respects to justify the grant of planning permission, and members are therefore urged to approve this application.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And can I ask that Darren Smith, if you could take the place? Thank you. I remind the virtual speaker that the meeting is accessible via our virtual meetings by the council's website. And now I'll move on to the council member. We're going to do Councillor Watson, who's going to introduce this particular application and debate. Councillor Watson is acting as the surrogate for Councillor Wilding. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm the proxy ward councillor for Councillor Wilding. Good morning, Chair, officers and colleagues. Before I start, I wish to thank Charlotte Atkins for her thorough work on this application. Owing to the significant public interest and the sensitivities of the application, it is before you today. On the surface, this application might have the appearance of being a simple desktop clarification of a condition, but as you look closer, you will find there is a confusing picture with errors and inconsistencies which call into question the validity and the purpose of the application. It even starts with the name of the site. It is no longer a farm, but is an administrative base of a business, of a building company that is set in open countryside. According to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, conditions are imposed on a planning permission, quote, when used properly, conditions can enhance the quality of the development and enable development to proceed where it would otherwise have been necessary to refuse planning permission by mitigating the adverse effects. The objectives of planning are best served when the power to attach conditions to a planning permission is exercised in a way that is clearly seen to be fair, reasonable, and practicable. It is important to ensure that conditions are tailored to tackle specific problems rather than standardized or used to impose broad, unnecessary controls. How can this condition be applied if its foundation is not consistent or secure? Secondly, the community employed its own legal counsel, that is, Trinity Barristers, and so has Herefordshire Council from Landmark Chambers. Unfortunately, due to legal privilege, I nor the community have access to this counsel. For me, this is not a level playing field. The community has been open and transparent by sharing their counsel, and it is available on the website. It has taken me several months to fully understand the intricacies of this application. It is not initially clear or transparent, and I ask you to look at the following paragraphs in the case officer's report. 5.20, the landscape plan refers to condition 3 of the permissions. 5.23, this fact, quote, could breach the requirement under condition 10, end of quote. 5.24, as you have heard, the community is concerned that the access is per landscape plan and not the site plan, and it is accepted that the difference is discernible. In other words, the difference is visible, clear, and evident. If you approve this condition, you are approving the landscape plan condition 3 and not a viable site plan for condition 10. In addition, in the condition, are you approving an access that is not viable? 5.26, the planning permission references have not always been consistent. This is a worrying detail. 26112 was refused on the 23rd of December 1999 for request of the removal of conditions number 5, number 10 and number 11 in accordance with the approved plans, that's 1077 on the 10th of July 1995 and 0398 on the 19th of April 1999. The appeal allowed in July 2000, but the inspectorate upheld condition 10 despite the appellant's views on the matter. 5.28, I question the applicant's affidavit signed in May 2020 that he can recollect the specific numbers of the plans, considering that he didn't have them to hand and had to rely on the diligence of the case officer to find them. Charlotte was not only given plans by the community, she had to spend time and energy delving into the archive. On hindsight, why wasn't this application returned to the applicant there and then? And at this point, for them to do the detective work, because look at the wording of the application to explicitly detail the approved drawings. When you compare Charlotte's list to the statutory declaration, his declaration states an unnumbered drawing, but does not list 3 plans that Charlotte has identified. In her letter to the agent in October 2020, she states, I have identified clear conflict between the plan you put forward as constituting the approved proposed site plan and that on which you seek to rely on as evidence that a lawful commitment was made. Additionally, the submitted drawings do not include a site location plan or drawings of the garages, so do not comprise the full extent of the plans. The agent letter dated June 2021 constantly refers to the statutory declaration made by the applicant, and he requests the case officer, quote, "Where specific drawings are currently unavailable, please would you include provision of drawings of this element for approval within a suitably worded condition within the forthcoming DN." End of quote. What drawings are you approving and why? 5.29. The poor quality of the drawings on the microfiche records makes the application invalid. Why not ask the applicant and the agent to resubmit a valid application with a site plan that has the location, boundaries, and specific detail of the buildings in this location? Please do consider the Communities Council's, that is Trinity Barrister's, submissions in her letter dated the March 2021, paragraphs 25, 26, 27, and 28. The application is unsound. Finally, I would like to ask why the chairman and the lead development manager made the decision not to have a site visit and not to consult me or of their decision. It is clear in the redirection list dated the 22nd of December last year that I requested a site visit at the redirection meeting. I only found out that I wasn't having a site visit on Monday, the 2nd of August. My reason for a site visit is that this site has a very long and complicated history, and the issue regarding the extant permission plus the landscape plan versus the absence of a site plan with condition 10 meets the requirement of a site inspection in the Constitution under 5.6.13c, where, I quote, "The setting and surroundings are fundamental to the determination or the conditions being considered and cannot reasonably be made without visiting the site in question," end of quote. Therefore, if you are not able to understand the intricacies of this application and the points I have raised, I ask committee members to request a site visit and defer this application. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to listening to your views on throughout this debate. Thank you.
Can I just say something now, that a statement has been made that there has been an unlawful declaration. I think members need to be very, very careful with such matters. Such a matter could be actionable in this particular case. I will get for clarification on the matter before us, which is more of a technical item than a planning application. Can I, Mr. Bishop, could you perhaps outline it in slightly more explicit terms? Yeah.
Yes, Chairman. In terms of this, I'll go first of all to the site visit. The request for the site visit comes through to myself, and I discuss that with the chairman, and we decide whether a site visit is required. A member can request a site visit, but it's not always granted. In this particular instance, because we are looking at purely identifying the application numbers on the decision notice. That is all that we are looking at today. We're not looking at any changes whatsoever. There's no changes to the setting of development, nothing whatsoever. All you're being asked to do is to put the application, the planning numbers on the decision notice. That is what we do now as a matter of course, and it's. But at the time those decisions were made, they weren't. Those references weren't standard practice to put on there, and that is why the site visit was declined. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Summers wanted to.
Thank you, Chair. Seems to be a real messy one. I'm not sure if this is the place to make decisions on this one. It sounds like a legal matter, or maybe not. But it looks like a new planning application is required in some form because it's 30 years ago. I'm not sure the rules are even close to what they were then. Anyway, it's complicated to me, so I don't really understand it.
Can I just say, it's complicated, and I and members have found some difficulty with this particular item. Sorry.
If
I can just clarify, obviously the planning history, the background is complicated. We've had to try and unravel that as officers. But the case and the application in front of you isn't that complicated. We've got a planning permission that we've concluded is extant. Yes, it was granted a long time ago, but they made a start within time. It's quite unusual not to then complete that, but again, that can happen. All that members are being asked to do is vary condition 10 of those permissions to list the drawings because they weren't listed. And as Mr. Bishop has explained, that's because when the permissions were granted, it wasn't standard practice. Back in those days, you used to issue a paper copy of a decision notice with a set of drawings stamped up approved, and off they would go to the applicant. That's why you didn't list the drawing numbers on the decision notice itself. Now everything's done electronically. It's usually condition 2 these days because we order the conditions slightly differently, but condition 2 would say permission is granted subject to these drawings, and then you would list all the drawing references, usually by their drawing number and their title. That's what's missing on this planning permission that we've got. It was granted by the council in 1990. A subsequent appeal was dismissed, but effectively only varied some of the conditions. So there are 2 planning permissions. They are extant, but they are missing the specific drawing numbers being included on those permissions, and that's what you're being asked to do, to insert those drawings. The application came into us. It did require some work on officers' behalf to unravel all the different drawing numbers, but we're now satisfied that we have a full set of drawings which are listed in the committee report for you.
Can I just say something? It isn't just a day that has taken place. The council has taken substantial legal and planning advice on this particular matter, and after an enormous amount of work, the legal and planning opinion is that this is the way forward on this particular item. We mightn't like it, or we may like it, I don't know. But this is a matter about not whether we'd like to have planning on this particular and what the nature of planning would be on this. This is sorting out a slight mess and I don't know that we can go any other way than take the legal advice we are given. If we do that, we're open to legal challenge. I do think in some cases surcharging, but anyway, that's another matter. Sorry, Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that sort of putting ourselves open to legal challenge is not a sort of reason to not question stuff. Actually, I think it's always important to be able to question stuff. And I think one of the issues around this that's certainly coming up for me is the fact that is the planning extant or not, and it seems to be that there's an issue over the reasons for it being claimed to be extant and the scraping of the road sort of within 50 metres of on the location plan being different to on the site plan, and for me that immediately throws up quite a lot of questions. And now we're just being asked to sort of rubber stamp something, but the actual basis of what we're being asked to sort of rubber stamp it doesn't seem to make sense. So I'm having huge difficulties with it because I don't know actually whether this should be extant or not. According to one version of accounts, it's extant because there is an access that is in a different position on the site plan to the location plan. With that,
Mr. Bishop, do you want to?
Yes, thank you. I can answer that. So we have sought legal advice as to whether the permission is extant. As you say, the works that are considered to be the material operation, which is what you need to carry out to implement it, is the provision of the access. Now, as I put on the presentation, the access was put in the place as shown on the approved landscaping drawing, which differs to the site plan. Now, that discrepancy obviously isn't ideal, and it's not something that we would hope would happen today, but it happened. We've sought legal advice on that, and the view is that the permission was granted subject to the site plan. and conditions requiring landscaping detail. When that landscaping detail was submitted, the drawing showed a repositioning of the site access. So when we approved the landscaping scheme, by default, we agreed a change to the position of the access. That's been made explicitly, that's been explicitly confirmed to the applicant in writing within the 5-year period that they had to start work, and they relied upon that. And it's reasonable for them to rely upon a letter from the council saying you have implemented your planning permission. So on the basis of those factors that the work was carried out within the 5-year period in accordance with an approved plan, albeit a plan that superseded the previous plan, the council have confirmed that a start has been made.
I'm sorry, but if I can just finish, that actually I feel that actually the council is at fault here, and that, you know, if we're talking about legal processes, well then, you know, this is possibly lays us open to judicial review, because it just doesn't make sense. I would prefer to see a new application. Thank you.
Councillor Rowan, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I will say it was a report that I don't know if anybody else on this committee it didn't have takes to get through. Some of it was right over the top of my head, but I like to think that bringing it back down to its simple terms, it's pretty obvious there's an awful lot of work gone into this report, and it won't just be by members of Kevin's team and Charlotte particularly. I think there's an awful lot of advice on people with letters after their names who know an awful lot more than we do, and we've got to trust in that. I am a little bit confused, but once again, it's here and we're advised accordingly about a project being started just by creating that small amount of access. I always thought it was footings, but anyway, once again, here to be advised. I don't see this today. This presentation is the cumulative effect of having an awful lot of work. So I'm going to trust in the system. I'm going to absolutely believe what is said. I do not like the idea of the planning committee members discussing what they think they'd like to see, what is presented. So I would like to propose that we go with recommendation on this one with the revised and reimposed conditions, which are generously and thickly attached at the bottom. So I'd like to propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Rowan. If I can just perhaps, for your confidence, hopefully draw attention to paragraph 5.11 of my report, which does set out the text of section 56(4) of the Town and Country Planning Act. And you're right, digging foundations is one of the material operations you can undertake to implement a planning permission, but there are others, and they're listed A through to E. And as the report says, it's considered that D, any operation in the course of the layout or construction of a road or part of a road, is sufficient. And case law, I think it's quite benevolent. It's generous in that it has to be a start of work. It doesn't have to be a significant amount. It doesn't have to be a proportionate amount of the development that's been granted. And it's an objective test. So the intentions of the person carrying out the development are irrelevant. And in this case, the applicant wrote to the council, said, I've carried out some work, will you come and have a look at it? Confirmed I've made a start, and the council confirmed that. And I think it's reasonable for them to rely upon that. Yes, we have picked up the discrepancies, and yes, I did write to the applicant and drew to their attention that the work that was carried out was in accordance with the landscaping plan and not the site plan. And that is a difficulty of this case. But the advice from council is that when the council gave the applicant the reassurance that they made a start, they did so in full knowledge that it was in accordance with the landscaping plan and not the site plan, didn't take enforcement action, and no legal challenge was forthcoming from local residents at that time.
Johnson, did you want to speak?
No, I would second Councillor Rowan's proposal.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Mill.
Well, I was going to ask actually, as the Proxy Ward Councillor was so very keen that we should have a site meeting, I know that it isn't a normal application, whether the chair would allow members to decide whether they'd like a site meeting and defer this application until after a site meeting.
I'm afraid we've got a proposal on the table.
Yes, I know. Had I got in before the proposal that Councillor Ode come up with, that's what I would have said. So if Councillor Ode's proposal fails at the vote, then I hope mine will be considered. But yes, I have another point to make, but I'll leave it for a moment.
I mean, the difficulty we have here is that we're not here to consider the application. We're here to consider the technical issues around what is deemed by legal advice to be an existing planning permission. So, you know, be frank, but anyway, we'll come to that if it's necessary.
Shall I continue or would you let somebody else?
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, of course, I accept that this is a rather technical application. I just wanted to ask a specific technical question, as there are these legal questions brought up by the Trinity barristers around the validity of the works that are deemed to have embedded the consent, and the various plans, the site plan and the landscaping plan, and the differences between them, and whether that if a breach of planning has occurred, as referred to by the case officer under 5.24, in other words, that the material start, if we accept that is what it is, that's not being carried out in accordance with the approved layout plan, should we not have expected a planning contravention notice under section 171C of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 to have been applied for to give a certificate of lawfulness if there is a question of doubt. So the applicant, if as he is claiming that there's been a sort of continuous minimum of 10 years use of the lawful start, can have that certificate granted, so that there is no question of its lawfulness. And I'm not aware, has that PCN been applied for? Is that not an appropriate thing to do at this stage?
Chair, you have to comment on that.
Yes.
Right, Councillor Mill. You've referred to a certificate of lawfulness of about 10 years. You've also quoted about a planning contravention notice. Okay. If there is a potential breach of planning control, a planning enforcement officer can issue a planning contravention notice, which actually asks for information as to that breach, how long it's been going on for, what the details are. That would have been something that would, if it had been brought to our attention many, many years ago, when the planning permission was obviously issued in 99 and hadn't been or had been lawfully implemented before 2004, then they possibly might have done that then. Okay, so if that's only a fact finding, so basically a requisition for information. If you're actually talking about certificates of lawfulness, 10 years and everything else, then the applicant could have come in if once there had been a query in place that lawful implementation hadn't occurred. But as far as I'm aware, and the case officer will confirm this, there has never been a certificate of lawfulness put in. We've obviously gone on the facts that we have and the drawings and seen what's been there and previous correspondence on the history of this site, which shows that at several points in time since prior to 2004 and subsequently, we have taken and agreed that there has been lawful implementation of the planning permission. Okay, so why would we want to serve a planning contravention notice to say that we believe there was a breach of planning control if we've already agreed that there has been a lawful implementation?
Is that a question, rhetorical question, or is it a genuine question?
It's just a question in general. Why would you serve a planning contravention notice to get information about a potential breach of a lawful implementation when you've already got categorical evidence that's down in the historical files to show that it's implemented? Why would you do that? So I can't understand what's your point in what you've just said?
Because of the doubt over whether it's been implemented correctly, that has been brought up in
We have
previous
resolved
planning
that. We have had legal advice from council, looking at the facts of the case, looking at the history of the site, and looking at previous correspondence, which has said that that development has been lawfully implemented.
All right, that's a point of view. Of course, I respect that. Thank you.
It's not a point of view, it's a point of law. Anyway, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say, I think the definition of a proper start leads to quite a lot of controversy and confusion, because as we've seen today, it is a very tiny, feeble little start, and there you are, you've got your planning permission forever. It would be perhaps better one day, and it's not an hour remit to do that, if they had a slightly more strong definition of a proper start. That's all. Thank you.
I mean, planning permissions have been deemed to be extant. When one, virtually a spade's depth has been dug of a foundation and no stuff in the not distant past. I mean, it's as little as that has been done in the past. I know of one particular case where it was just a small hole in the ground was deemed to be of start.
Yes. It just seems bizarre that such a tiny work can be a proper start.
Just in confirmation, Councillor Bowen, there has been plenty of case law about what minimum could be construed as lawful implementation, and the case that Mrs. Atkins put in her case officer's report about the Malvern Hills DC case was minimalistic, to say the least, but the courts had decreed that was a lawful implementation.
Yes, I'm not disputing this particular case at all. I'm just saying it does, to the general public, simply say a puzzling definition.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to agree with Councillor Rowe that it was a very complex read. But what I would like to say is I'd like to thank Case Officer Charlotte Atkins for the answers that she's given us this morning. It's made the case far more clear in my view. And I would like to say that I will be supporting it.
Right, where are we? Yes, Councillor Rowan and Councillor Thomas. Right, we have a proposal. Are there any other speakers? That recommendation is approved as set out in the order papers.
Yes, Chairman.
Do you want to?
Mrs. Atkins will do the summing up on this case, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in response to the representations from the Parish Council and the clarity of the conditions that we're recommending, so that's at the end of your report. Quite correctly, they've picked up that condition 1, condition 2 and condition 6 all are compliance conditions now, requiring development to be carried out in accordance with details about materials, landscaping and drainage that were approved by letter dated the 9th of December 2003. Because of the age of that letter, it isn't on the website, it is on the statutory register, but still on the hard copy. So to prevent, hopefully, anyone else sitting in a few years' time having the same conversation when hopefully I still won't be here to clarify where that letter might be found, it's recommended that that letter is appended to the decision notice. That will then go onto the website with the decision notice and sent out to the applicant as well, so everyone is very clear what the approval given for those conditions was on the 9th of December 2003. And hopefully that then closes that that last bit of imprecise nature of the recommendation. So it's with that added appendix, with the letter appended to the decision notice, that the recommendation is put forward.
Right, Councillor Watson, I believe needs to.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, colleagues. And I really do respect that you've only had a chance of a week to read the report and to understand the intricacies. And as many are saying, is that it is a conversation between lawyers. And unfortunately, the community and I haven't seen the counsel being provided by Landmark Chambers. But fundamentally, whereas I hear that you are wanting to approve, I would really ask you to consider about deferring this application, because to see the site visit, you can actually see the scrapings. And when you see the scraping, it does not meet any of the criteria that has been listed in 5.11. There's no construction, there's no demolition, there's no digging of a trench, there's no laying of an underground main or pipe, there's no foundation of a building, no operation in the course, or any change of any use of land. So that's why I ask, is that because you are basing your approval on a landscape plan and not a site plan, I urge you for a site visit, because for me, can you be reasonably make a determination without visiting the site? This other point with about deferring is to ask the applicants to submit a site plan that applies with condition 10 with the access on the plan. I think that if members are confused and not feeling confident, what precedents are we setting? I really welcome, the debate, and I really welcome, but at the moment, I urge you to consider a deferral for the above reasons I've given before. Thank you.
Chairman, I know it's out of order, but for clarification, if we were in fact to defer and make a site visit, and then decided that we don't like what we see, yes, I'm confused then about what the position would be. As I understand it from our case officer, everything that can be done has been done to make sure that plans and letters, etc., are in order and the numbers are appended where that needs to be the case. Against that background, whether we like what we see or not at the site would appear to be irrelevant. Am I right or wrong?
I could say from the chair, you are correct. Yes, you are correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Summers.
Yeah, I'd like to support that. There's already a letter gone out from the council saying it's being done.
Yeah.
So that's official. Why are we discussing any further? It's a legal obligation.
Yeah, you're correct. I do caution members, we are open to enormous costs. If we were to then subsequently go and say we don't like it, so it's not, well, we're refusing, we're playing a game, we're refusing something that already exists. Councillor Bowen.
Mr. Chairman, just a final point. I think the remarks made by Councillor Watson concerning the definition of a start have been very well covered by our legal officer and this.
I know from history going back a number of years, I had a similar situation over one little house, small house, where it was deemed that a square hole, well, I could hardly get in it, stand in it, was deemed to be starting a start on a particular planning approval. And, that went ahead. So,
May I ask a question, Chair?
Yes.
It's about the legal advice from council, why we've not been able to see that. Can I ask that, because that's not very transparent, and I think the residents of Herefordshire would like us to be transparent, and there are many issues around transparency, and this is one of them that sort of leaves me feeling quite uncomfortable again.
It is my understanding, Councillor Fagan, that this was considered, but obviously all council advice between council and instructing solicitor or instructing client is legally privileged. To actually then release that can cause problems further down the line for any subsequent legal advice is given. It was felt, I haven't dealt with this one, but it was felt in this instance that it's legally privileged and therefore it should only be for the instructing solicitor and the case officer to have that information to hand. And all it is behind is to look at what is case law on implementation. Do we think that on the basis of what we've got in front of us or what's been happened before, has that been implemented? And it's our view that it is. Okay, that's what the council's advice said. But obviously there are, I just say I haven't dealt with this. It's not something I dealt with, but that's why we always say that it retains legal privilege. You start saying that you can have this, you can have that. The problem is it puts the council in a very difficult position. Okay. Now you may not like that answer, but that applies across the board unless it's felt that it's necessary, but it's only then divulged to set people rather than out to the general public. Obviously, if you do have an issue with the fact that legal advice is legally privileged, I would suggest you take that up to solicitors to council.
Thank you. Well, you're right. I don't like the answer, but.
Well, the alternative is you're suggesting that the legal advice that has been given has been misinterpreted by the officer, professional officer.
No, I'm just suggesting that we should be as transparent as possible.
Right, we have a proposal that seconded, I think, Labour is not, that we approve according to the recommendations outlined in the paper. Those in favour? Those against? And that is carried. Thank you all for your attendance this morning. Thank you. I hope we get next meeting clearer, the applications are easier to deal with.